Yeah, so we're going to have some talks now. We've had our official AGM business, and I'm pleased to say that all the directors who stood for election were voted in. So thank you for that. I am the outgoing chair, so I'm stepping down from the chair role and moving to treasurer, and I'm Tom, in case you didn't know. And yeah, so we are going to move on to the talks, and the theme for tonight is solar and farming, friends or foes, which I'm not going to talk about. I'm going to leave that to our experts who are joining us tonight. So we've got Alistair, who you can't see at the moment, but he is hovering in the background on Zoom, and he's from Plymouth Energy Community. And we've also got Professor Matthew Cotton, who is with us in the room tonight from Teesside University. And big thanks to Matthew for stepping in, because we originally had Dr. Karen Parkhill, and she unfortunately couldn't join us because she's got some family issues to deal with. But yeah, very glad that Matthew could come along to help out. And if anyone's got any energy left at the end of the night, then we'll be heading to the Blue Boar over the road and carrying on discussions there. So yeah, so we'll get on with my talk. So I'm just going to do a year in review. Basically, it turns out there's quite a lot to talk about that's happened in the last year. And for those of you who were in the first bit of the meeting, I gave you a little bit of a flavour of what's been going on, but we're going to go into a bit more detail now. So I'm pretty sure everyone knows about us at this point, but just to remind, yeah, Alan's on there. Just to remind you, so we originally started in 2015. We've been a community benefit society for 2 years now. So we're trading, we've got staff and all kinds, and we are all about reducing emissions to tackle climate change, and we do that through energy-related ways. So generating community-owned renewable energy and saving energy as well. So we're helping people decarbonize their homes, retrofit them, and also we're helping with fuel poverty. But you probably already knew that. So to give you an idea of the activities that we've been up to in the last year, we got a new thermal imaging camera from Northern Power Grid. And again, I apologise for the colour reproduction on this projector. But yeah, so as I said earlier, we had to test out the camera, obviously. And we've been going around houses, we've been doing assessments, we've been doing whole house assessments for people who want to do a deep retrofit, doing home energy checkups, which is kind of a level down. And we've been doing thermal camera assessments as well. And also lending out one of our thermal cameras. That's been going really well. Very unhelpfully, I've moved this over, so I'm not sure if you can see. But yeah, we've. This is just an example of one of the houses that we visited, where we took the thermal camera, and this is actually quite common of houses with sloping ceilings. But where the slope is, the insulation just kind of stops because they couldn't figure out how to get it to go down the slope and stay in place. So as a result, there's just a massive cold spot with just heat leaking out of the house. So the thermal camera's been really interesting for picking up things like that. But yeah, we've been doing those assessments, and it's been myself, Johnny, and Ivana doing the assessments. And we've also had the help of 2 qualified retrofit coordinators as well. So we've got John and Maria who've been working with us. So that's been really good. On the York Energy Advice side, so we've been helping people in fuel poverty and other vulnerable groups, helping them if they're having problems with their bills. I think we probably saw these stats before, but we've been doing it for 2 years now. It's been a really good 2 years. We've come to the end of our initial funding and the end of our partnership with St. Nick's. So we are now running the service on our own. We've got a new logo, which you can just about see there. Yeah, so it's just a York Community Energy service now. But we've been doing lots of installing radiator foil and draft proofing and LED light bulbs and things like that. And we've been doing lots of talking to energy suppliers on the phone for hours on end, and yeah, helping people get retrofit. So council funded retrofit, things like solar panels on roofs, cavity wall insulation, things like that. We've been doing fuel vouchers. We've been doing all kinds. It's been really good. We gave out quite a lot of dehumidifiers, which helps people dry their clothes more cheaply than using a tumble dryer. And if they were previously drying them inside, then it stops the condensation from building up. Because one of the things that we found is that when the energy crisis hits, people stopped heating their homes so much, especially people with not much money. And then, of course, the home gets colder, and then you start to get more condensation, which brings more mold with it as well. So the dehumidifiers have been really helpful in that respect. So it's been very busy. We've been working with support organisations across York as well. Got lots of partnerships, and Ivana's been doing lots of outreach and training people up and making sure they understand how to help people with energy issues and how to refer them to us if they need to as well. So it's been super busy on that front. On the solar side, Rich has been going out and talking to schools and trying to get people to sign up for solar panels through our partnership with Solar for Schools. At the last AGM, we had one school with solar panels on the roof, which we couldn't really take credit for because they kind of started the process before we joined in. But that was Clifton Green Primary School. And I said at last AGM, I hope that we'd have more by the same time next year. And we do, I'm very pleased to say. So we've got a couple more with panels on and more in the pipeline, which Rich is going to talk about in a moment. And we've got, I think the most recent one is Lord Derrimore here. And we've not got an official photo yet, but you might just about be able to make out the panels on the roof there. They're definitely there anyway. So yeah, so that's been going really well. And thanks to Rich for doing all the chivying of schools and getting them to reply to your emails and send us energy data and things like that. It's very important work. So just a few little stats for you here, and I did put this in earlier, but just to recap on it again, just to kind of put into context and to give you an idea of the scale of the things that we're talking about. Yeah, so we've done quite a few assessments. We've done loads of home visits. This is all in the last 12 months, and quite a lot of grant funding as well, which we saw in the accounts earlier. And we've got even more since those accounts were finished as well. Right, I am going to hand over to Rich briefly, who's going to talk about the schools pipeline.
All right. Yeah,
if that's okay.
I did this slide last night and didn't have time to explain it. So yes, so we saw the figure there on the previous slide. We've had 3.5 installations, so that's great. That's a really, that's a good kind of increase on last year's one. The half refers to one that is being installed right now. So they're out on the roof of Archbishop Holgate School this week installing solar panels. So we're hoping to go down there and get some pictures of us all looking very pleased with ourselves, with the staff there perhaps at some point. So that's and apart from that, so we've had the Clifton Green Primary last year. We have Archie Holgate's halfway through, Huntingdon Primary, Lord Derrimore, as Tom says here as well. So that's the 3.5 for, if you want to round up. And then we've got more installations in the pipeline. Westfield has been on the tray for a while. I won't go through them all, but yeah, but you can see how it's looking up from last year. Then these numbers are coming through. The scores are coming through the pipeline. We've got a lot of leads, and really we're at the point where we're pushing them to Solar for Schools as fast as they can actually kind of arrange for the installations. And so this is a really good situation to be in, and we've got this good pipeline, and we're going to see more schools, more solar panels in York next year. And it really matters because, of course, this is schools showing to kids, look, we're doing something for the future. We are tackling the climate change. We're responding, and it fires up their imagination, and it shows them what the response is possible. So it's a great thing to be involved with. And it also, are we talking about the Solar for City project?
I'll do more about that later.
Okay, all right. And there's also the possibility of taking 1 or 2 of these arrays into community ownership later on. If we are going to set up a portfolio, then Solar for Schools is happy with that. And obviously the school itself has to consent. We can't do anything without the agreement of the school. But these are also potentially something that we could then, as a group, own ourselves as well at some point in the future to really help retain that benefit locally, because Solar for Schools is a community benefit society, but their community is schools across the country. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. And yeah, so it's great, and really it's the start of us getting solar panels on roofs in York, and that's really important, and we're hoping to build on that, like Rich says. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the kind of partnerships and the funding that are going on, Like I say, we've got lots of partner organisations that we work with through York Energy Advice. So there's lots of people across York. We're all doing cross referrals amongst ourselves and working with the council as well. Home Start is a new one that's been added, and I'll talk more about that later. And yes, and we did have the 2-year partnership with St Nick's, and like I say, that's finished now. But they were really helpful and instrumental in getting York Energy Advice set up in the first place. So we're very grateful to them for that. In terms of the funding, so where the actual money is coming from, we originally had a big pot of money from the Energy Redress Scheme. That's finished now. The council have very helpfully stepped in and given us some funding, which is coming via the government. So it's the Shared Prosperity Fund. And so this is a national level funding scheme, which is being kind of distributed via local authorities. So it's been really helpful that the council have been able to help us get that money. And then we've actually, I think we've got three funding pots from the council at the moment as well. So they've been very helpful in that respect. And Northern Power Grid as well is another one. But yeah, we've always got lots of funding pots going on and applying for new ones all the time. So keeping that pipeline of funding going to make sure that we can continue to do our York Energy Advice work. And then in terms of influence as well, it's been a really important year on that front. You can see there some of the specifics about the funding that's been coming in, but it's not just about the money. Particularly with the council, we are quite embedded with the council now. They've got their Advice York network, which has got lots of support organisations in York, all talking together, all collaborating and things like that. So we're part of that. We are part of their fuel voucher scheme. So when we set up York Energy Advice, we didn't have a fuel voucher scheme. And so that's come from the council, and that's been a really great added extra. So we've been able to help people top up the prepayment meters and things like that, and just make sure that they can get through the winter of what has been a couple of really difficult heating seasons. And through that relationship, we've also been invited to partner with them on larger funding bids, which I might talk a bit about later. But there's a lot of stuff sort of up in the air at the moment. But yeah, and we've got a good relationship with the councillors and the officers. There's been a change of administration, so it's Labour who are running the council now. But we've got a good relationship with Labour, like we had with the last councillors, and the officers are still there, and we've got Denise, who's a new member of the board of directors tonight, as of tonight, who was a member of the executive on the council, and she's been really helpful in getting things set up and really sort of setting the scene for the council. I think to have that drive for retrofitting homes and really starting on the whole decarbonisation thing. And really, a lot of the stuff that she set up has really laid the groundwork, and they're continuing on with that now, and they're as enthusiastic about it as they ever have been. So I think well done, Denise, and thank you. But yeah, so there's also the local enterprise partnership. So they've been asking us to be involved in steering groups and things like that. And they've been talking to us about funding, and Northern Power Grid as well. So we've got all this influence now. There's people taking us seriously. There's people asking for our advice with stuff, and inviting us to apply for funding, which is always nice when someone says, "I really think you should apply for this funding." It's a nice thing to happen. And we've spoken at some of their events as well. Another exciting development is that we've got a new office. So we've got 4 staff now working on York Energy Advice. So there's myself, Ivana, and Johnny, and then we've got a new staff member called Amanda, who is there. And so we decided that we should probably get an office really to put all these staff. So we've actually had 2 offices this year. We started off at the Opportunity Centre in town, which is about 3 doors down from Barnett's. And we'd been in there about a month, and then they went out of business, and so then we had to move out. So that was a very brief tenure. And then so we had to find another office very quickly, and happily we found the cemetery of all places. I have to say, the cemetery, believe it or not, is a very nice place to have an office. And it is a nature reserve in itself, and there's all kinds of walks you can do around there, all kinds of exotic and prehistoric trees and things. Highly recommend a visit to the cemetery. It's a strange thing to say, but there we go. But yeah, there's also some office space in there. So yeah, we moved in. We've been in there for a couple of months now, and that's been going really well. And we also met some office neighbours in there who are Home Start, and they are an organisation that work with young families. So they help people who've recently had children who are struggling with whatever challenges that brings, which I can tell you, and probably most of you know, are quite plentiful. And yeah, so they're a really good local charity. And so we've set up a partnership with them to work on one of the funded projects from the council. And we're doing cross referrals to each other and publicising, as doing like joint publicity and things like that as well. So that's been really good. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the university. So the university has got a sustainability group where students can do voluntary work in the realm of sustainability. And so we worked with them to set up a project where we basically had a bunch of students scouting out some potential rooftops in York for us to have community-owned solar panels, so commercial buildings, and they've been using open solar to have a look around the rooftops of York, and they've been designing installations for us. And yeah, so they've given us a document with all those potential sites in, and we're going to be looking at that in the near future as we try and really sort of build up some momentum with our Solar City farm. And on top of all that, we've been doing our usual events and raising awareness. We've done lots of eco homes, cafes. We did energy drinks not long ago, and had lots of people in the pub talking about their solar panels and people who are thinking about getting solar panels and things like that. And of course, we've been to the Fulford show. We always go to the Fulford show, and yes, had some good conversations there. So we're always doing lots of outreach and raising awareness. And we've also been talking to other local groups in the region, so climate action groups and things like that. People trying to get started. So we've been sort of paying it forward and giving people tips on how to get started and things that they could try and tackle and things like that. It has been a very busy year. It has been, quite frankly, a blinder of a year. And it's been so amazing and busy that I've had to step down as chair just to have a rest, quite frankly. But no, it's been absolutely great. And I said it before, but thanks so much to all the directors for being part of it and making it all happen. There's just so much going on at the moment, and it's always that thing about being busy is a good problem to have, and it's definitely that at the moment. And there's a lot of, I think, during COVID, we did a lot of outreach on Zoom. We did a lot of networking and things like that, and that's just laid the foundations for everything that's come after that. So we are really kind of, we're kind of reaping what we sow now. So it's been really great. In terms of the year ahead, of course, we've got our new chair, Johnny, who's graciously stepping up to take over from me. And I'm sure that we'll be doing some very exciting things under his leadership. There's various things that we've already got planned in the pipeline. So the Solar City farm, we're still really keen to get solar panels, community-owned solar panels on the roofs of businesses. And obviously we've got the schools, we've got Solar for Schools going on, but we want to get our own YCE solar panels up there as well. And that is all sort of bubbling away in the background. That is starting to come to fruition. Hopefully we'll have more news on that soon. Related to that, big funding news. There's a few potentially very big funding projects. We don't know what's going to happen with them yet. We might get them, we might not. It's all very up in the air. If even one or two of them land, then there's going to be a lot to talk about at the next AGM. But a lot of that is linked to the solar stuff, and we are potentially going to get solar panels on roofs of community buildings and things like that. So this is all because of the North Yorkshire devolution that's going on. They're getting a whole new North Yorkshire unitary authority, and there's money coming out of that. So this is it's called the net zero fund. North Yorkshire net zero
Mayoral Combined Authority, not the unitary one.
Mayoral Combined Authority net zero fund, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So it's quite a big deal, and yeah, we'll see. It's going to be the end of the year before we know for sure what's going to happen with that, but that could be really big. Similarly, on the retrofit front, we want to keep going with that. We want to scale it up. We want to get more retrofits happening in York. Again, there is potentially some big funding related to that, but again, we don't know yet what's happening with it. So there's all kinds of unknowns at the moment. Lots of potential. It's very exciting. We've been kind of dipping our toe in the water of non-domestic energy advice this year as well. And so we're going to explore that a bit more. And I know that Johnny's really keen to push that forward. So we'll see what happens with that. But we've started talking to community centres and places like that about how we can help them save energy, because we've had a lot of inquiries from schools, community centres and things like that. Just because everyone's really struggling to afford these energy bills, and even though the price caps come down slightly, it's still basically double what it used to be. And of course, it's even worse for non-domestic as well. So anything we can do in that area, we'll definitely try. And of course, we've always got events planned. So it's York Environment Week coming up on the 23rd of September, and the 50 Plus Festival. And we're just going with the one event this year. I think we did 3 last time, and that was quite tiring. So we're just going to go for the one. But yeah, we've got York Open Eco Homes. That's going to be in conjunction with St Nick's as usual. But I mean, Ivana is instrumental in organising that. So, but yeah, so that's going to be. There's quite a few homes. I think it might be 9 homes that you can. 8. Oh, 8. Oh, okay, 8 homes. But yeah, you can sign up on Eventbrite for the homes that you're interested in. Go and have a snoop around. There's people who've retrofitted the homes. There's people who've built a passive house from scratch. There's people who've got an all-electric caravan. That sounds interesting. So there's all kinds. So go and have a look at that. And there's the St Nick's Autumn Fair on the 14th of October, which we'll be doing a stall at as usual. We've got one of our own retrofit events on the 18th of October. Actually, that's Eco Cafe, Eco Homes as well, isn't it?
Well, it's sort of Eco Cafe Plus, I guess. We have 3 speakers lined up. One will be Marianne from People About Retrofit in Manchester, talking about the sort of practicalities of how you sort of try and get retrofit work done. So the things that you need to be thinking about contractors. We've got an actual contractor, or a builder, Steve Hall, and actually, funny enough, Denise will be talking from her householder's personal experience, and there'll be some time for people to also network and sort of connect to each other and exchange experiences. So it should be a really good event. It will be at York CVS for a change, not here.
Excellent. There you go. And we're going to be putting on a draft proofing workshop at some point as well, but we haven't quite set a date for that yet, so we'll let you know when we got more details. And there'll be a million other things as well as the year progresses. But we are planning for it to be another very exciting year. I'm not sure it's possible to top this one that we've had, but we'll see. And very excited to see Johnny taking the lead on that. So that is pretty much everything from me. I was just going to say as well, we've got some lovely new hoodies. So if anybody would like a hoodie, come and talk to us. I mean, we might be able to do another batch maybe. But yes, if you'd like a hoodie, let us know. And I'm going to stop talking now because I think I've talked for quite long enough. So thank you very much. Lovely. Okay. So I think what we're going to go to Alistair next. And I'll just switch.
Questions at the end. We'll have all three speakers up as a panel.
Yes. So we'll go to Alistair next, and we're only 15 minutes behind schedule, so that's all good. Right, I'll just get Alistair on the Zoom.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, I can just 2 seconds. I'm gonna move it over to the projector. There we go.
Colour product.
Yes.
Really bad.
Right, so we can see you, Alistair.
Oh, good.
Can you hear us okay and everything?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
And everyone at the back here, Alistair? Yeah?
Yeah.
All good. Okay, have you got some slides to share?
Well, I've got some slides to share, so I will do that. Okay. You seeing those Are you seeing those slides?
Yes, lovely, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Great to be here broadcasting from the far southwest. And great to hear the progress, the amazing work that's been happening in the last year. So I guess I'm here because Rich kind of wanted me to come along and tell a bit of the story about what we'll be doing in Plymouth. And I think, the heart of the reason why I said yes was because I believe wholeheartedly that every area needs a York Community Energy or equivalent. Every area needs to be tackling the challenges of the energy transition locally, because it can't be done in any other ways. This isn't something that can be done to us. It's something that we need to work together to make happen, and that needs to start in the locality. So I'm going to tell a little bit of the story about what PEC has done in the last 10 years. We're 10 years old this year, so it's kind of a nice time to kind of reflect. And so thank you for the opportunity for speaking this evening. I guess I hope to give you and leave you with a little bit of inspiration to say, well, yeah, we did really, really well last year, but we can do better next year and the year after that and the year after that, because that's what we all need to do to tackle the challenges around net zero. So what is or who is Plymouth Energy Community? We're similar to you. We're a charity, we're a social enterprise, got cooperative ethos under sort of runs through us in the same way as you, as a community benefit society, and we've got a mission purpose to create a fair, affordable system, zero carbon energy system, where we're putting local people and place at its heart. That kind of means those kind of four things we kind of see and talk about this as a kind of local energy as much as community energy. Sort of, it's not just about this sort of ownership models. It's also about people coming together to in localities around communities of geography and place, bring organizations together to cooperate and collaborate to make stuff happen that can't otherwise happen. We are about increasing ownership, but we talk about increasing ownership in the broader sense of that. So yeah, that's people taking kind of stakes and investments in our renewable owned assets, but also about sort of just the idea of building ownership and then the ability to take action on the issues that are prevalent around the journey. Crucially, it is about helping people, often the most vulnerable people, to help heat and power their homes affordably. So we've been around for 10 years. We started as an initiative sort of sponsored by the council. So we came about as part of the 2012. There was a change in political administration from Conservative to Labour, and that Labour group came in with a sort of blunt, but beautifully blunt kind of ambition to do three things. One, to sort of challenge the incumbent kind of model, so sort of like the big six that was really prevalent at that time. Those local politicians knocking on doors. We're hearing a lot about, the frustrations with then what was the big six. It was still only big six at that time. they were hearing a lot about the frustrations and struggles people were having around fuel poverty, particularly those on key meters. And they see an opportunity, or saw an opportunity, to do more with the solar installation that Plymouth gets. We get a lot of sunshine. Plymouth's known for its rain, but it also gets a lot of sunshine. And Plymouth at the time was lagging behind in terms of the amount of renewable energy, particularly solar, deployed. So we talk about local energy solutions, and this is the heart of what we try to do. We believe net zero provides an unprecedented opportunity to put local people, organisation, communities at the heart of restructuring our economy. This is a kind of opportunity that doesn't come around very often, and to tackle the kind of inequity and poverty and inequality that has come from energy being done to us. There is an opportunity to take ownership of this in a different way. No longer can energy be controlled from the centre. It is distributed in the way that you guys are learning, and we want to make the investments that come alongside those changes for the energy innovation needed in this space to actively tackle and reduce poverty and inequality, maximise the social impact of those investments, and in doing so, by thinking these things up front and having this kind of mindset at the beginning of these kind of conversations around investment and business models around energy, that we tackle the justice and equity that we see in the current kind of energy model. So local energy solutions, York Community Energy, Plymouth Community Energy, we need these organisations. It's not a kind of nice to have. These are things that must have. Every area needs an organisation like us to get the job done. What does that mean in practice? I always say that we operate in two arenas. We are a community wealth building organisation that seeks to develop projects that bring long-term assets. Most of our assets at the moment are renewable energy assets into the control of the community, where that investment coming in to build those assets is directed for the purposes of the local community. And we're a people organisation. So we are about speaking and talking to people in the granular level across our city to support them with wherever they are in relation to their challenges with energy, whether that is like challenging with the day-to-day minutiae of managing a household budget, through to effectively deep retrofit on their homes, through to working with, I guess, other stakeholders in other influential organisations across the city. So we do people, we do outreach, we do engagement, and we build assets together. What does that mean in terms of where we are as a people organisation? So we've gone in 10 years from an organisation where we had 1.5, and we started off with 1.5 full-time equivalents, which was me and a few other people. I was working about half a day a week on the organisation at the moment. We're now, as of this week, we're employing 33 people. We're employed, and they're all on our books as employees. We've got 28 non-exec directors and trustees working across that as kind of volunteers. We have suites of volunteers alongside that as well. And we divvy our work up into, I guess, 6 kind of broad areas. One area is like the support for the organisation, in terms of how we run it, but equally their kind of technical areas that we work in are in the energy advice space, supporting fuel poor homes, supporting people with their domestic retrofit journeys, supporting people with their community renewables, and we have in the last few years been progressing a project that is to deliver 70 affordable net zero community-led homes in the city as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, I guess, in terms of where we are and where we've grown to. That's what I just talked about. So our energy teamwork, so this is where we started in many respects, so supporting people with the issues they were having around fuel poverty. So most of our work, we will currently have like 12 staff working in, I guess, a kind of energy advice and outreach kind of capacity, supporting low income or vulnerable households with their challenges around affordable warmth. And this is a case study from one that completed just in the last 6 months. I'm not going to read to that, but I'm just going to flick through these slides and just give you a flavour of what that means for us as an organisation. We have, as I said, 12 very skilled, professionalised community workers that are having conversations with individuals in need and families in need. And those conversations start with energy, but very quickly expand beyond that. We're often, playing a kind of social work role in a kind of voluntary community sector space, but needing to work with effectively. I think currently we're working with about 120 different other local and hyperlocal referral organisations within our city to ensure that when we have contact with that household and begin to have a conversation around the challenges they're having around with energy bills, that we're able to actually then move on into other work around supporting them with the other challenges they have around income maximisation, around well-being in the household, the connection with other kind of local poverty or sort of social support services, access into small-scale charitable grants or other kind of more, I guess, like established Department of Social Security kind of grant support work. So it's a very broad-ranging and challenging role, but the outcomes that we can deliver from that are also equally as broad-ranging. So yeah, we can talk about the number of households we supported, but it's actually the breadth of support that comes out from that that's really important. So if we're going to hit those ambitions in relation to local energy and tackling the inequality that we currently have within our local energy systems, we need to support these people as a core part of what we do. And it sounds as great. It sounds like you're already on that journey. We've also been working to develop a comprehensive retrofit service. So a lot of our work continues. We started in a partnership with the council. We continue to work in all our strands of work in various depths of partnership with our local authority. The retrofit work that we do is no exception to that. So we have now got a team of, I think we got, as of this week, like 15 people working in the retrofit space that are a combination of retrofit coordinators, retrofit assessors, retrofit advisors, and people just supporting people, very good energy advisors, just helping people with their journey from putting their hand up and saying, I'm interested in retrofit, what kind of options are available to me in my house, through to getting completed and grant supported works on those homes. In practice, that is our role, is to, I guess we see ourselves as the honest broker sitting between households that are often confused by the myriad of different messages there are around what you should do around energy in the fabric of your house, or whether how you can power your house sustainably or heat it in a green way, through that help them through that journey, through to accessing grants and accessing high quality local installers. So we sit as an independent trying to help people in that, and I guess sign people through that journey. And these are two kind of case studies from people that were kind of successfully made it through that journey. In the last few years, most of our work has been focused in the delivery of what are support of retrofit programs designed to support those people on incomes of less than £30,000 in their household incomes, less than £30,000, utilising grants available from government to do that. But we're also interested in developing services to support those people that are in a position to do this themselves. They have the money to do these things on themselves, but are currently struggling because, again, the kind of options paralysis that we see of like, where do I start? Are heat pumps a good thing? Is solar a good thing? Why don't I just do my light bulbs and and all that, because it's very complicated, something I'm sure you guys are familiar with in York. So again, we got a team of people working on this. We've brought in the last 2 years in the order of about 4 million of money that has been secured jointly by PEC and the City Council to deliver that. We've just in the programme process of finishing 169 homes benefiting with grants between either up to £20,000 under HUG or up to £10,000 under LAD. with those homes benefiting from a mix of measures, from external wall insulation through to underfloor insulation, through to heat pumps, PV, cavities, insulated lofts and things. So quite deep retrofits on these multi-measure retrofits. That program is just in the process of finishing. It's due to finish in September, the end of this month, and it fell hard on the back of a program that we ran in and completed in 2022, where we set out to target 300 homes. We didn't quite get there. We only got to 127 homes, but that was pretty good given the challenges that were happening during that program. But I'll put this slide up because of the way that we try to do this is, again, we act as a broker locally between the householders and local installers to make sure that that money flows obviously to the benefit of those local householders, but also to the benefit of the local supply chain. That's the normal way these programs work. The normal way these programs work is the money comes into a local government organisation, they procure a large tier 1 contractor, and then that money gets funneled through the tier 1 contractor down to the households. Often the local SMEs miss out on that. So with these programs, we've been able to ensure that 99% of those funds are spent within the local economy. And through that, build a relationship with those local supply chains. Local renewables. It sounds like your partnership with Solar for Schools is going great guns. We started on doing our local renewables stuff back in 2014. In 2014, we did 22 schools and community and rooftops. Yeah, all schools that year. I think it was all schools in 2022. A mix of installations through from effectively the smallest at that time was about 25 kilowatts through to the largest install we've got, which is on now, that was delivered in 2015 on our the big life centre, the leisure centre we have in the centre of a city. And they were built and funded with community shares that we raised through in 2 different share offers in that year, and they continue to operate and run now. So we've now got a total of 33 installations across the city, and in 2016, we supplemented those rooftops with our first ground-mounted scheme. So we developed and built out a 4 megawatt community-owned solar farm that's on land that was owned by an economic development trust in the northwest of the city. It was land redundant for a number of different reasons, and blighted for a number of different reasons, and we were able to work with that local local development trust, bring it forward and get it completed in 2016. So that leaves us as a community business owning 25% of the city's renewable generation capacity, which is no mean feat, and puts us in a strong position to turn the revenues and the surplus revenues that come back into grants to support our work on fuel poverty. So last year we had £60,000 come out of that one straight back into PAC's wider work, and next year we're forecasting about £125,000 coming out of that to go back into grants to support other things that we do. We want to go further, so we're currently developing this site. So this is a picture of our 13 megawatt solar farm that we have planning approval or land agreement to do, and we have a contractor lined up to build next year. This is built on, proposed to be built on an old landfill site in the east of our city that has not been landfilling for some time. It's been capped and I guess settling as landfill sites do for the last 20 odd years. Now forms a fantastic opportunity to put solar on it and provide power back to the city council. So we are aiming to sell the power from this. All the power will go back into meeting the local authorities' energy needs, and in that one sweep hopefully decarbonise the council's footprint by somewhere between 70 and 80%. We have another program as well. We've got another 2 megawatt solar farm kind of that we're just hoping to take through planning next year. But alongside this work, we've been looking at the role of community-led homes as community assets, and the role of a community organisation like us to effectively lead the charge and then the associated innovation required to bring forward affordable zero carbon homes. And we've been doing this since about 2019. We saw a strong alignment between the challenges that we were seeing day to day in relation to the quality of homes available in the private rented sector, the challenges of poverty in those homes, and effectively what we saw was a lack of actors bringing forward really kind of the innovations required to drive the change needed in the net zero housing space. So we're now at a place where some of these kind of, I guess, ambitions are now becoming reality. We've wanting to bring forward, this is our kind of, I guess, our general kind of purpose for our PEC home scheme is to identify, projects that can be flagships for innovation, that can demonstrate different business models, the required different business models that are needed to make net zero new affordable homes work. To effectively bring the local partnerships needed to happen to bring forward the sites, the development partners, the finance, the local authority into a single place, and to nicely and friendly bang their heads together to make it happen. We believe we're succeeding in that space. Last year we got approval for a site in the northwest of the city to develop out 70 affordable net zero community-owned homes. We are in the process of bringing forward the Reserve Matters applications for that. They will be submitted after Christmas, and we hope to be on site with those first 40 homes in next year. We're working with an innovative modular housing provider. We're in the middle of the procurement of that, who will work with us through those final design stages, and we are in the process of becoming a registered social landlord so that we can access the affordable housing grant needed to make this happen. So these are all things that I think a local energy organisation can do, and it's brilliant to be here this evening to hear where you guys are in terms of York, and I think great to see the breadth of ambition and the breadth of the different kind of initiatives that you're trying to do in York and succeeding. So I guess my task this evening was to say, keep doing it, because we need to do more of it, and I'm going to leave it at that, and I think there's an opportunity for questions at the end. Thank you.
That's great, Alistair. Thank you very much. And really sounds like you're doing some great work down in Plymouth. Exciting. Hope that the big ground mounted solar panel installation goes well. I think we're going to have questions at the end, but I think what we'll do, just because I need to do some technical stuff with Matthew's slides, should we have some questions while I'm fiddling about with that? And and can I just ask you, have you had any issues with getting local support for that big ground mounted solar project then?
We had a lot of support, but we also had a reasonable amount of objection as well. The objection came because the landfill site had been abandoned and had done a brilliant job of, when you leave places alone, they rewild beautifully, don't they? So and so there was, and there is still, some really nice sort of passage migrant sort of bird habitat there, and there is some kind of nice sort of wet grass and bits and pieces on it. So the local birder community didn't like it, and the idea of panels on there. We had good conversations with those guys, and we were up front and shared it and where we were right from the start. So they didn't like the idea and objected heavily as part of the planning application process. But what was clear was also the support that was also there. for it. So whilst we had, as part of that planning process, there were like 60 letters of objection against the proposals. We had somewhere in the order of 115 letters of support. So that was, whilst these planning decisions are never as simple as just how many letters of support versus how many letters of objection. It really helped in that case. We were also able to demonstrate that whilst we were quite upfront that there would be impacts within the footprint of that site, that we were going to bring into management the remaining, it's about a 15-hectare site that we're seeking to put panels on. We bring another 17 hectares into long-term positive management for biodiversity gain. So that I guess the implementation of that management plan for that sort of seen to the ability to, I guess, mitigate the impacts from where the sun panels were. We're in interesting stages at the moment of finalising the ecological surveys needed for that, and I guess that long-term management plan that would be implemented once we're complete next summer.
Right. Wow. Amazing. Well, good luck with it. Right. Have we got any questions? Yeah.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah, my name's Martin, and I can see you. May be able to see me.
Can you hear Martin?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
You may have said this earlier on in your talk, and I may have missed it, but I'm wondering how many staff you've got in your organisation to enable you to deliver all these things.
So we have 33 staff as of today. We have 2 more staff starting next week. Most of those people are full-time or sort of 0.8 kind of, so it's a big chunk of staff. We're a people heavy organisation. This stuff doesn't happen without it. The majority of those staff are focused on either the energy advice or the retrofit services side of things. That's where there's a lot of time. I guess the development of the housing work and the renewables projects is less I guess staff intensive. It still requires staff intensive, but so we've got 3 or 4 people working on those side of things.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi there. My name's Ian. I'm the resident accountant, would you believe? And the question is really about the financing of the projects that you've just been talking about. I heard you mention a share issue or allotment. I'm just wondering if some of it's funded by grants. Is it funded by loans?
Sure.
So
yeah. So there's this, what I've painted is a very broad picture of things, and all of the above is true. So on the renewable side of things, we've raised through 3 share offers £2.2 million worth of investment from 520 different community investors and that underpins some of the investment that went into the rooftop installations and the solar farm installation at Ernest Settle that I showed you a picture of, and we will do that again for the new solar farm.
I'm sorry, I was interrupting then. I'll have to come back to you and ask you how you actually do a share issue via, I'm not sure how your entity is set up. I got the impression it was a community benefit society, similar to your Community Energy.
Yeah, we are. So we're actually got quite a complex structure. So at the heart of the organisation, we have a charity which delivers all our, I guess, our affordable warmth and poverty and retrofit services works and our outreach work. We also have a community benefit society called Pet Renewables that specifically focuses just on our renewable energy assets. And that is the organisation that has done the community share issues through that. And they've also raised, I guess, debt finance, both from public sector and commercial organisations to fund those. The charitable organisation is securing lots of grants to deliver the affordable warmth work. So we have grants and service contracts through the charity with organisations like National Community Lottery Fund, the Energy Redress Trust, National Grid, and then a range of others that have been supported us in the past.
Thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Pretty well, yeah.
Any other questions? I think we'll have one more question and then we'll move on.
Two very quick questions. One is there was a lot of objection from the birders, but what was the response from the birds? My second question is, what is underneath the array? Are you making any use of the space underneath?
So I think so the birds, yeah, unfortunately are silent in these kind of conversations, aren't they? So we haven't cleared any of the scrub or started on site yet. So the real response will happen then. But we'll deliver the required clearance work to get on and build the panels and put the panels on in times that are sensitive to, I guess, the migration season and the nesting. So we hope to disturb them as little as possible. We're pretty confident. Like one of the key areas of interest for that site are skylarks. It's a really rich spot for skylarks, largely because it's one of the few areas in our city where dogs aren't walked, and so there's a big area of effectively undisturbed rough grassland, which is perfect for skylarks. When we put the panels down and put the fence around the site, it'll be even better. There'll be even less dogs, and the grassland will be able to be restored under the panels. And we're pretty confident that nesting conditions, if they're not as good, they'll be nearly as good as they are currently. We're also anticipating doing some kind of like reseeding in certain areas. There will be a change to the floor of the grassland because of the shading of the panels. We expect that, but we're also kind of on top of it in relation to thinking about how we might be able to reseed certain areas of bare ground that will be left after the construction phase with species that would be kind of more still diverse, but like more shade tolerant, and therefore not, I guess, stopping the current species that will be lost, just be taken over by competitive grasses. And so maintaining some of that floristic diversity in the grassland.
Right, amazing. I think we will leave it there for questions. Thank you very much, Alistair. It's been really interesting. If you're able to, and willing to stay for the next talk, you can do, or feel free to log off. And but yeah, either way, it's been great having you, and I hope one day we can be as successful as you guys. And yeah, keep it up.
Thank you for inviting me. Great to see you.
Okay, lovely. So I am going to invite Matthew to come over now, and we've got a presentation from Matthew on agrivoltaics. I'm just going to, yeah, no, that's fine. I'll just get it started, and then make sure it's on the right screen. That'll probably help. Okay, I'm just going to move the Zoom that over here. Then right on there again. And I'm just going to share. Is that one? Okay, right. We've got it on there. We've got it on there. And then, all good.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm a stand-in, unfortunately. So Karen unfortunately couldn't make it today, but we worked together on this project, so I'm quite happy to present these findings. So I'm going to talk a little bit about agrivoltaics. Agrivoltaics is obviously a portmanteau of agriculture and photovoltaics. You can see from this sort of little diagram, I think we had made up for a brochure at one point, which is basically taking solar photovoltaics, putting them on stilts effectively, and then growing things underneath. It is a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the kind of basic design. Now, I must say that if you look at some of our project partners, we've got the University of Arizona. A lot of the initial research on this started in Arizona and other parts of the United States, in part because farming was becoming uneconomic, partly due to issues around drought or other kinds of things. And so a lot of farmers were thinking of basically converting their land into solar farms. And this kind of idea was really about trying to do both. So it's kind of maximizing income for large landowners in the kind of the sunnier bits of the United States. But we're kind of thinking this project was funded by what's called the Global Challenges Research Fund, which was a scheme that didn't do very well because it was funded from the aid budget. Effectively, this was kind of cross-fertilizing research and aid money for developing countries. And of course, during the global pandemic, which makes it quite hard to do research if you're not allowed to travel. Also, if you remember, the proportion of the UK GDP budget was kind of shrunk as the aid budget was reduced. So after this project was funded, suddenly half the money was taken away. And so Sheffield University very kindly stepped in and kind of pulled a bit of extra money so we could keep this going. But we'd already signed contracts to actually build these things, so it became rather difficult. Oh, is this the click thing? This is where I press.
Probably need.
I'll just use the arrows.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
I think it'll need. Right, I think the clicker should work now.
Oh, brilliant, thank you. So now I must say that I'm a social scientist, and quite a lot of the work that I did with Karen was sort of social scientific research, but I'm going to present a bit of the sort of technical information around the system as well. And the project was called Harvesting the Sun Twice. So it's this idea of can you use the same land twice? And then we're going to look a little bit at the end on whether or not you can apply this kind of thinking for controversial solar farms in the UK, because this is a big debate happening at the moment around using land that would otherwise be used for agricultural kind of produce for energy production. And obviously that's raising a lot of questions, a lot of political questions, as well as kind of local community ones. The important thing to note is all of these teams, these are sort of massive teams, but we had lots of different types of organizations involved. I just wanted to really point out the one at the top right, this World Agroforestry Center in Kenya and in Tanzania. So basically their specialization is in using trees in agriculture. So they have a lot of expertise in growing shade tolerant crops and kind of combining these things. And actually that expertise was really useful when you're trying to plan for the shade from solar photovoltaics. So the question that I guess that we were sort of set is, well, can we help with lots of different things all at once? So this is the system that we built. This is a sort of basic 3D mock-up. I can show you an actual photograph of the one that we built. This was actually while it was being constructed, but you can kind of see that the idea is you have a relatively self-contained system. So by elevating the panels, you create patterns of light and shade through the gaps between them. Along each of the edges is a kind of gutter which collects rainwater, which you can then, because it's elevated, you can then use gravity-fed rainwater harvesting in the tank in the top left, and then use essentially gravity to irrigate the crops that are grown underneath. So you have a relatively low energy kind of system because it's gravity fed, which is also relatively self-contained. Now this was the one that was produced at Latia Farm in Nairobi, or just outside of Nairobi. But we also built another one in Tanzania. This one it's called the grid tied system. So and the other one was more sort of self-contained with its own kind of battery system. I'll talk a little bit about the technical aspects in a second, but the idea is that we have these sustainable development goals around water, energy, food, socioeconomic development, and land. And the idea is that maybe this is a technology that hits multiple sustainable development goals at once. And so we wanted to see, is this a good fit, particularly for East African communities? You don't have to worry about it a lot, but there's lots of different kind of work packages that look at both the socio-technical and economic impacts, evaluating the land use governance, looking at the operation of the systems, and then kind of trying to make this practical as well. So developing tools to decide where is the best place to put them, developing a kind of business plan, developing kind of a policy strategy as well. So we've done a lot of work also with kind of energy and agriculture stakeholders in East Africa to try and launch this as a project. I find that in Uganda, in Kenya and Tanzania, which were the 3 countries we looked at, they all have a kind of renewable energy policy and they all have subsidies, but most of these focus on usually sort of home solar systems. So it's a single panel, usually with a couple of sockets and a small TV or something like that. And these are really good projects. They're really good in the sense that they do bring electricity access for rural communities where the sort of cost of that kind of last mile grid access is so high. But they're quite blinkered in the sense of, well, we'll only fund these. And we were trying to expand the different applications of solar and trying to get policymakers to support that as well. So these were the 2 sites that you can kind of see just outside of Nairobi and in Morogoro in Tanzania. The hosts that we worked with were both kind of education, training and capacity building centers. So we focused on ones that were training up the next generation of farmers. And they were really kind of enthusiastic. They're very small systems in the scheme of things. We're talking about a 62 kilowatt and a 32 kilowatt off-grid system in both kind of semi-arid agri-ecological zones. But this was the kind of construction of these. This is Latia Farm, which was the sort of larger 62 kilowatt grid-tied system. And I can give you some of the stats. So the electricity generation around 33.2 megawatt hours. It created, if you like, 58% self-sufficiency. So this is a big kind of agribusiness development site. So they're doing lots of other things on the same site, but nearly 60% of their energy needs were met by this alone. And the big thing that they really liked about this was the huge energy savings, because one of the big issues in Kenya at the moment is the cost of living crisis sort of on steroids. While we were actually in Nairobi, there were protests in the street, people protesting against tax rises and other issues compounding this ongoing cost of living crisis. And obviously, in Kenya, they're quite sensitive to these sort of global market forces, which are a huge problem for poverty overall. So saving the energy was quite important. I prefer to use the arrows. You can kind of see the electricity. So this is the energy demand for the site over this kind of 2 and a bit year period. You kind of see that the point at which we actually constructed the system and it came online operational in May 2021, you can kind of see that it's a little over half of their electricity needs were kind of met by this system. And again, also I just mentioned there's a irrigation use and gravity-fed rainwater harvesting, so which was very helpful in terms of reducing the energy for agriculture, because you no longer need a diesel pump to irrigate your crops. And so that also led to a reduction in the overall water demand, because we didn't need to pump water to the site as much as you used to. So there's kind of other sort of secondary environmental benefits there, which are not just energy related. Some of the research that we did was looking at food production. So there was a lot of kind of research on the crop produce beneath the panels, and obviously there's a control site next to it where they're growing the same crops, and we did that for both sites. Basically, strangely enough, I mean, some crops did better than others. The cabbages were heavier and also wider. This is one of those, I'm not a crop scientist, but the crop scientists are getting very excited about heavy cabbages. And I would, but that's also quite important, because in order to make the kind of business case for this, you need to show that you're not kind of losing agricultural productivity at the same time as you're using the same amount of land. Obviously, the difference in the UK is Nairobi has quite an even temperature all year round. It's very highly elevated. It's about 20 to 22 degrees pretty much all year round. But it has a lot of kind of sunlight, so it has a high solar potential across the whole country. So it's actually kind of ideal conditions for this kind of system, which might not necessarily be applicable to Yorkshire, for the same. But I'm not say that it wouldn't work, but it's worth investigating further, right, and applying this to different agri-ecological zones. Now, this is where I'm kind of unsure about how much time I want to spend on this, because we've got a lot of social science data here as well. Because one of the things that we're really interested in, aside from anything, are some of the issues around social justice. Now, whenever you implement a new technology like this, you kind of change the social conditions in which, in this case, the agriculture itself would operate. So there are big sort of gender differences in terms of the types of agriculture that men and women do in the countries that we were looking at. If you have a system that provides shade, you can grow higher value crops underneath. So you might grow, for example, strawberries or chilies or something which is produced in smaller quantities but has a higher market value. So there is a sort of gender dimension around what these sometimes call these kind of nursery crops that are often produced by women. But then if you have a system like this, is this going to mean that this empowers women in terms of their livelihoods and increases their income, or will this get taken over by men? We were a bit concerned about those issues, but we wanted to explore them. So we did a lot of interviews with national and international stakeholders across the Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya, and also some kind of international agrivoltaics experts. And we also did some workshops with stakeholders in Nairobi and Morogoro, trying to, we interview lots and lots of people. We record everything that they say. We take all of that text and we do a kind of coding framework to find out common themes and specific ways in which these issues are presented. And I've got quite a lot. This is what Karen said. We've got quite a lot of data and it's all a bit text heavy, but I'll give you a kind of general run through. Now, I can either leave you to read it or I can give you a summary and switch slides. It's kind of up to you. So essentially, the big one that we were looking at is this idea of kind of energy and land use kind of conflicts. Now, the big ones in Kenya and Uganda, for example, are around people cutting down forests. It's using biomass from forests to create charcoal, or simply just having bad agricultural practices, just burning forest for land clearing for crop growth. And we can kind of see that actually this might be a way of protecting those things, or definitely kind of reducing the kind of destruction that might happen if you protect the land as a result. There's also issues around upskilling this kind of young or independent kind of nation. Kenya in particular sees itself as what it describes as the kind of hustler nation. This idea that it's full of young people who are trying to build businesses and think of innovation and trying to find a sort of niche where they can make money. And this was seen as a potential opportunity for that sort of young hustler generation to develop. There were lots of concerns around crime and damage. I'm sure you find the same things for community-owned energy projects here, and certainly for solar farms, talking about sort of fencing off these areas. They're quite valuable and they're relatively easy to steal if they're on the ground. So people are saying, well, actually, if they're a bit higher up, that might make it more difficult to steal. But, they're valuable systems and, you can put them on the back of a pickup truck. So there's huge issues around being a target if you're a rural area. Those are a big concern as well. I'll just slip through. There's also this thing about sort of scaling out beyond a commercial scale. So these systems cost around, that one in Latvia costs about $70,000 to build. And most of the cost comes in building this sort of bespoke steel frame. A lot of people that we asked in the stakeholder workshop said, well, if you just give me a load of panels and an inverter, I'll build you a wooden frame that would work perfectly well. I was like, yes, that sounds like a really good idea. Maybe we should look at that. There's issues around load bearing. You might have to have more supports, which might make it more difficult to grow crops underneath and farm them. But, certainly the cost of the steel was one of the biggest ones. And we got this company, Chloride Exide, which is a kind of local, quite big battery manufacturer to do the installation, but we wouldn't necessarily have to use them in the future. So a lot of the cost was from the bespoke design rather than the panels themselves, which are not that expensive in the scheme of things. So there's a lot of this thing about how you might sort of scale it up. So if you're a small scale farmer, there's no chance you're going to get $70,000. So we'd have to look at kind of donor funding. We'd have to look at ways in which you could make the this type of technology a desirable investment for banks as well. And so being able to show the return on investment through energy savings and being able to maintain agricultural productivity was quite important. And that's one of the things that we were trying to do. But certainly, for the most part, it's not really that suitable for the smallholder farmers, but it was going to be more suitable for these bigger agribusinesses, which is kind of fine in one sense, but not from a community energy perspective, unless you have a big community energy collective that can raise that kind of capital. I'm conscious of time, so there's lots of issues around investment, cost inflation, and this kind of ongoing financial crisis, which is making investment for these kinds of capital projects quite difficult. And sort of getting government support can also be quite difficult when they already have a policy on solar energy which focuses on other things like solar home systems. I already mentioned the issues around gender norms and energy. There's lots around how this might kind of change the gender dimension of farming, possibly in a good way, but not necessarily. So yeah, there's kind of lots of opportunities around land ownership and land development that comes from these technologies, and I could go on for hours, but I'm conscious of time again. There's lots of, and so there needs to be kind of gender sensitivity in terms of the development potential of this type of technology and its design. We've got a lot on gender dynamics as well. So, I mean, you can ask me some questions about that at the end rather than sitting and reading all of the quotes. The important thing, I guess, is about who do you trust to, when we're introducing a new technology like this, who do you trust to tell you about it, to kind of get you excited, to get you investing? And for something like this, you have a community energy group where you kind of scrutinize these things amongst yourselves, and that importance of kind of trusted social networks to provide you good advice on what you should build and how to develop it is quite important. And there isn't really the same kind of framework for community energy projects in the countries that we were looking at. So building those from the ground up might be a more important thing to do than trying to say, buy this big expensive technology. And I think that's a really important thing as well. Again, we were kind of worried, well, will it avoid this kind of land use conflict? Now, obviously, in a lot of these countries, it's not so much the problem of a lack of land, because there's plenty of unproductive land that could be used for this type of approach. But there's also this question around, well, is this the right technology, or should we be putting them in cities? Should we be putting smaller solar panels on people's homes in rural communities? Should we be putting them in lakes? You know, comparing this technology to other renewable alternatives, I think, is also an important aspect to consider. So in the end, we kind of come up with more questions than answers, as is often the case in research. But certainly this idea of locating solar power and agricultural land at the same time does have promise. There is potential here. When we look at the possibility in the UK, you can kind of see that actually, when it comes to solar farms, there are an increasingly vocal opposition movements emerging, much in the same way as they did towards onshore wind energy a decade or so ago. And this idea of creating a sort of political conflict between food and energy for the use of the same land is quite important from an electoral position when you think about, you know, a Conservative Party that's under stress, shall we say, and doesn't necessarily want to start annoying, you know, rural landowners, farming communities, rural communities at a time when it feels vulnerable. So support for things like big solar farms might be reduced as a result. And we can kind of see that this might potentially alleviate those problems, but it might also make them worse, because you're taking a solar farm and you're elevating it even higher so that the aesthetic impact, the amenity value of it becomes even worse in one sense, because you can view it from further away. So these are all kind of big questions. It could potentially be a solution to land use tensions, but it might also make them worse. And one of the big things we find from a social science perspective is that when we look at community opposition to big energy projects, a lot of it comes down to identity. It's the idea of you identify yourself as a rural person living in a rural area, you bring an industrial technology, the sense that it industrializes the area and then damages your sense of connection to that place, which then harms your own personal sense of identity, which makes you want to reject it. So there's this sense of it's more than just a technology. It's a threat to a way of life, or a threat to a perceived sense of self. And that's one of the reasons why we see such kind of quite fierce opposition to relatively minor environmental impacts. So that's kind of one aspect. And the other, of course, is the who gets to decide. I'm working on another project at the moment, because in Teesside, looking at the hydrogen village proposed project in Redcar and one in Whitby. And the big thing that they're worried about is the sense of it being imposed from the outside, from an external organization that doesn't represent their community and has interests that they're not sure about. A very different approach to a community energy project. So this question of who gets to decide, who gets to impose things, ultimately, do you have a sense of control over that? I think says a lot about the overall acceptability of these types of technologies. And, just assuming that all the economic benefits and the land use benefits are going to kind of sway people is usually not enough. So just to finally, these are new technologies. It's really niche as an energy transition, and it deserves a bit of scrutiny, but it does have some potential benefits, particularly for things like reducing soil evaporation. By creating shade, you actually reduce soil evaporation. It reduces water demand, improves crop quality. It's better ecologically. You can do lots of things. You could have animal grazing underneath. You could do beekeeping underneath. You don't necessarily have to grow crops. So there are kind of opportunities there, but it's not going to solve this food, energy, land use crisis all by itself. And so certainly if we can look at this, applying it in Yorkshire, it needs a bit more work. And then finally, just a picture of Karen and I pretending that we built this ourselves, but very clearly we didn't. Just a couple of social scientists who rock up at the end. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much. I'll let you communicate back.
Well,
I was trying to, should I
take some questions?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really interesting, and yeah, it's interesting that you've kind of pointed out that it's not just about the facts and the reality of it, but it's all about perception as well. And I think that's one way that community energy can definitely help, because we can engage, in the kind of grassroots. So that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, all the evidence says that a sense of community ownership improves kind of outcomes for energy technology from a kind of social acceptance point of view. For obvious reasons, really, but and that can have various different forms. So I think the earliest approaches were, we're going to build a massive onshore wind farm and we'll give you one wind turbine and you can share the profits of that. And obviously it's moving on, that conversation has moved on a bit towards a more kind of empowered and distributed energy system over the last sort of 10, 15 years.
Right, have we got any questions from the floor? And I'm going to try and choose people who haven't asked a question first. Yeah.
Change to use soil from growing conditions. Can it be used as part of the reverse desertification?
Now I know exactly the person who could answer that question, but she's not here. So we do have a researcher who does this kind of sort of suitability mapping, looking at how you can apply it in different areas. And I think one of them was around combating desertification. You'd have to do it on a pretty massive scale to have any big impact on the overall kind of water balance for a larger region. But certainly in terms of localized water loss, soil moisture was improved quite significantly. So it would help, it wouldn't hurt, but you would need something quite dramatic in order to stop desertification on a large scale.
And in the UK, particularly around here, where we've got more or less drought conditions.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, but again, I don't want to oversell it. It would help a bit. But, these are long-term climate change problems that are not going to be resolved by, a half a hectare of solar panels.
Okay. Brilliant. I think I'm going to have to be really mean to say one last question.
Out of the room by 9.
Yeah. So, Pam, did you want to go?
Yeah. Do you know know if there's any research going on in Northern Europe conditions, either in the UK or elsewhere in Europe during the
Yes, so there is research in France and Germany, Japan, some in Poland, and in things like wine growers quite interested in this as an opportunity. There are, I mean, I say you could have different configurations of panels. So some, for example, have done sort of, if you like, corridors of panels vertically, and then you can drive a tractor down the middle. Again, for sort of mechanized agriculture, it becomes a bit more tricky unless you're going to do it that way. But yeah, there's lots of different kind of projects going on at the moment. A lot of it is very focused on the right configuration of panels to get the balance of shade and growth, or looking at different designs, different panel designs, and also creating things like, could you have semi-transparent solar voltaic so you get more light going through, for example, or having ones that track the sun versus fixed ones. A lot of that's quite sort of technical stuff that is being conducted at a very small scale. But I will say that most of the projects are experimental rather than commercial at this point, for that reason.
Okay, great. Right, we're going to have to leave it there and tidy up. But if I don't know if you're able to join us at the pub, or if you've got to get.
Unfortunately, I do actually have to head back, but thank you.
Well,
but
thank
next
you.
time.
It's been great having you, and thank you very much. Very interesting.
Well, thank you very much.